Hello. I received a response in 4 to 6 business days. But stuff still happened. So what's up? Palantir cannot see why kids love the taste of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Despite being a corporation that's very, very well known for all their surveillance software, they just cannot see the cinnamon swirl in every bite. That's enough of that. Palantir's in the news. What's Palantir? Palantir is a US tech company that was founded by Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, and some other jabronis. It was founded back in 2003, and one of its major founding funders, aside from Thiel, was literally the CIA. There's this thing called InQtel, IQT, and it's a taxpayer-funded venture capital firm that explicitly invests in corporations to support the CIA. It's a pool of money the CIA uses to coerce tech people to do things for them. And if you're Palantir, you just love that idea. So from the drop, Palantir's stated mission is to build software to help the government do surveillance and shit. They specialize in militarized intelligence. Like this is what they do. But they're also a company, like on the stock market, not a part of the government. One of their flagship products is called Gotham. And what it does is combine a whole bunch of data that's not really supposed to be combined so that they can type in someone's name and find them. It's not necessarily that straightforward, but the idea is that it is an omni surveillance system. So Palantir's already kind of not well liked among the general populace. And then this past weekend, they took to Twitter to post a 22-point summary of a book that was co-authored by the CEO, Alex Karp. It reads essentially like a manifesto, and I'm not going to read every point to you here. I have linked it in the newsletter, but it basically summarizes to, we should get rid of democracy, poor people are bad, and multiculturalism failed us. Oh, and billionaires are fundamentally more important than you. They also call for forced military participation from all citizens of the US. And just to like drive home how out of touch this random ass manifesto was, here's a point from it. Quote, public servants need not be our priests. Any business that compensated its employees in the way that the federal government compensates public servants would struggle to survive. Hey, motherfucker. That's because the government's not a corporation. Weird. So yeah, out of nowhere, they come on Twitter and they're like, hey, everyone, here's 22 bullet points from our founder about how we think the world should work. And it's all fascism. Isn't that exciting, everyone? Alex Karp is a fucking madman. Like, the dude can't stop excitedly talking about how good Palantir is at finding and killing people, or at least helping to find and kill people. Like, the dude is a comic book villain. So much so that a lot of the commentary about this has described it as such. Cheyenne McDonald at Engadget pretty much coined it and said that it basically reads like the ramblings of a comic book villain. The response was swift. People were like, hey, what the fuck? That was me being everyone. Just so you know. A bunch of articles came out about how unhinged this post is. Palantir's stock started to drop when markets opened on Monday, and now foreign ministers are discussing whether or not they should drop their contracts with Palantir because what the fuck? Hey, I could be your national security advisor. Yes, do that. Now look, I am not a fool, usually. I understand that militarized intelligence and national security and surveillance and all of this stuff is just a fact of reality. It is a part of having a country in 2026. It just is how it is. And Palantir is just all too happy to capitalize on that. That's all they're doing, is playing the game, but playing the game without showing any remorse for the lives that they're ruining. And it really is kind of like a don't hate the player, hate the game situation. Except I can hate the player because the player is changing the game's rules. When you sit down to play Monopoly with your like younger cousin and they get upset because you took all their money and they're like, that's not how the game works. The game works where I get money. You say, okay, sure, here's some money. That's fine, it's a board game, I don't care. When a multi-billion-dollar defense contractor installs a vice president of the United States into an authoritarian regime that then turns around and uses that company as the forefront of their mass deportation efforts, I don't think that you then give them monopoly money. That's where I was going with that. Taxpayer dollars, through the CIA, funded the start of Palantir, whose essential express purpose right now is to create surveillance software for foreign and domestic use. Heavy on the domestic. Like, they truly do not think that anybody in this country deserves privacy. They would prefer a world where every single person's actions are cataloged at all times. Alex Karp is the epitome of somebody who looks at the world and says, I kind of know how computers work, and therefore I can fix all of the problems in the world. Optimization is the solution to humanity, is it not? There isn't much of a closing argument here, except for Palantir fucking sucks, and at least more people know about how much they suck now. Keep on showing your ass, Karp. I look forward to your trial. Let's talk about something completely different that I had no idea was happening, and I'm actually kind of interested in, and also might not be great, but could be cool. That was a lot of qualifiers. Let's talk about battery passports. Way over in the EU, in the faraway lands where they are EU-y. They've been doing a lot of policy. So you know how there's been a lot of digital policy recently that's just been fucking dumb, like all the age verification stuff. Well, in a world full of dumb policy, the EU sometimes does get it right. I think they've had a pretty hit or miss track record with digital policy so far, but sometimes they do get it kind of right. And this is interesting to me. Battery passports, the concept, which I will separate from the rest of it, the concept is that for every industrial grade battery on the market, there should be a QR code that you can scan that will tell you information about that battery, including its composition, where it was sourced from, who had previously used it, information like that. This would apply to big boy batteries, so batteries that would go into like an electric vehicle or some sort of like personal transportation device, like an electric scooter or something like that. It would not apply to cell phones, laptops, at least not yet, but the idea is that it's supposed to be a consumer protection. It's like a nutritional facts label, but for batteries, and it updates over time as that battery is used, recycled, or repurposed. So if you're buying a device, especially a used device, and you want to get actual information about how good the battery is in this device, you'd be able to get that using this system. Cool, okay, interesting, kind of neat. That seems cool. Why are we doing this? The idea is that they are working towards a circular economy. It's essentially a recycling program. If we can better track the history of all the batteries that are in circulation in a given location, then we can better take care of where they're going to end up and what's going to happen next with them, rather than them all just being trashed. There's actually quite a few things that the EU is hoping to sort of like do something like this with, but batteries is kind of the pilot program, so to speak. And especially batteries in like industrial contexts. So as a general consumer, you don't have much to worry about right now. Here's where it gets a little messy. I am a software developer, and one of the first things that I was thinking as I'm reading the documentation about these battery passports is, how is this going to be implemented? Like on a technical level, where's the data going to be stored? Who controls it? Who verifies it? Who can access it? And how? Quite literally, like how am I going to scan a QR code? What network is going to connect me to what database to get what information? I'm genuinely curious. Is there like an authoritative database? Please don't tell me this is like some blockchain bullshit. Good news, it's not blockchain bullshit. Because it's no bullshit yet. It doesn't exist. There are legal requirements in place about how the battery passport program will work, and they are more or less the following. First, a user must be able to scan a QR code to pull up the information. That one's pretty basic. Next, there are 3 levels of privacy regarding the information that can be accessed. Public information, like the battery's manufacturer or the battery chemistry. Protected information, like the battery health or the charge cycle count. And regulatory information, like the supply chain. And finally, it can't matter who the manufacturer is. This has to work regardless of who you are. So that says what has to happen, but it hasn't said how. They're still working on the actual technical details. So I can't really give an overview of how well structured this is, but you don't have to look far to find another EU digital policy that had a massive security issue almost immediately. I'm gonna go back to the age verification stuff. The EU recently rolled out the first version of their age verification app, and it got hacked almost instantly. The hack didn't really do anything. It was more of a proof that this is not a perfectly well and securely constructed app. But the researchers basically said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this app is going to have a huge problem. And that's one of the constant issues with verification on the internet. If you need to verify people, that means you need to get their personal information. If you get their personal information, that means it's in transit. And information in transit is dangerous. What's also dangerous is when that information is stored, either intentionally or accidentally, and then retrieved by an attacker. And unfortunately, a lot of tech companies are not in the business of deleting the information that they've received. They just store all of it instead. So unfortunately, you can't just take reasonable sounding digital policy and just expect it to work well. On the surface, age verification makes sense. A for-profit company who's engaging in business practices that are restricted to adults only should verify the age of their customers. If you go to a club, the bouncer is going to check your ID on the way in. But there's a very big difference between Jeremy Bouncer at the club down the street checking your ID and your computer telling everyone who wants to know what your age range is and anything else it might know about you. All while digital Jeremy Bouncer has a copy of every ID they've ever looked at for safekeeping. So battery passports, good, bad, I don't know. I genuinely find it interesting. If implemented thoughtfully, it could genuinely be a boon for consumers. Again, it's like a nutritional facts label for batteries. I would love to have actual accurate battery information before purchasing something. And I'm already happy to see that they're considering stuff like multiple levels of privacy with this battery information, even for stuff that most people wouldn't think about, like how many times has the battery been charged? That's considered private. So I'm glad to see that that's already being considered, but I have my doubts. Still, neat. We're missing the forest, but we're also missing the trees. In late March, the Trump administration essentially gutted the entire US Forest Service. This happened right before wildfire season, and we have already gotten to double the year-to-date average of wildfire acreage burn. Said another way, we are on pace for an unprecedented wildfire season. The policy is cynical and genuinely insulting. They're moving the Forest Service headquarters from Washington, D.C. to Utah. And then they're closing all regional branches. They're also closing almost all research facilities, which are spread around the country for the express purpose of researching how to prevent forest fires in different places around the country. So you might be wondering, why Utah? What? Utah is famously cozy with a lot of the natural resource extraction industry. Logging, mining, all that good stuff. They love getting them lands from Utah. Utah's also suing the federal government to get more land, presumably to then hand it over. But the governor and senators of Utah are very, very aligned with that industry. I should say that part of the argument from the White House is that they're going to make this more efficient and that they're going to have a dedicated task force for dealing with fires. They established a new department under the Department of Interior that is the Wildland Fire Service. This department has not been funded and is already understaffed. So they gutted the people who are generally the ones that are going to take care of wildfire season, while establishing a totally new department that is supposed to do that, but didn't get it funded. If you live in an area that's prone to wildfires, please take extra precautions this season. Have an emergency plan, make a get out bag. Please be careful. Would you like to have artificially intelligent feet? I know I would not. Shoe company Allbirds has recently announced that they're going to pivot and become an AI infrastructure company. Allbirds is a Silicon Valley darling, and while they're not really like a tech company that's like a unicorn that you invest in and get a whole bunch of money back, those are the typical darlings, they were instead just like a fashion statement. If you were a tech bro in Silicon Valley, you probably had a pair of Allbirds. Allbirds then went public and then completely fucking failed. Their stock went from about $30 on opening day to under $3. Basically losing all value. Allbirds was supposed to be a conservation-focused company. They're a B Corp with public benefit initiatives, and the whole idea was sustainably sourced shoes. But that failed, and now they're pivoting to AI, arguably the least sustainable thing that we have on the planet. How can they do this? Great question. So they're listed on the stock market, right? They are bird on the stock market, and that's a shell listing. It's not literally Allbirds, but Allbirds is like a brand that can be separated from that shell listing. So their plan is to get rid of the Allbirds brand, rebrand themselves as New Bird AI, and get buy-in from the current shareholders to make this pivot. Because part of the pivot includes giving up on that whole being good to the earth thing. Maybe they'll like sustainably use slave labor to dig up cobalt. Now, I should say that after they announced the pivot, their stock price did spike, kind of put it into meme stock territory. I would not generally recommend investing in Allbirds right now. I'm also not a financial advisor. Also, don't trade individual stocks. Lightning round. Virginia has become the latest state in the US to enter the gerrymandering war, as they just passed a new temporary redistricting map to get themselves some more seats for 2026 in Congress. This was a response to what started over in Texas, where they did the same thing, but for Republicans. Kash Patel is suing The Atlantic because The Atlantic ran a story about how Kash Patel has been drunk on the job this whole time. And Kash Patel was like, I'm going to sue you for defamation. I'm really looking forward to Discovery. Microsoft is reportedly planning some changes to the Game Pass pricing structure. The new CEO of Xbox is not thrilled with the current value proposition of Xbox Game Pass. After California coffee chain Phil's Coffee made a new rule that required them to take down pride flags in their stores, they undid that rule because obviously everyone was like, what the fuck? You're a California coffee chain? What did you think was going to happen? According to the Wall Street Journal, fewer people are moving to Florida and more people are leaving Florida. While there are a lot more wealthy people who are going into Florida, the average person's being priced out and seeking a life elsewhere. And finally for today, an otter barged in to a garden center in Scotland where he kind of made himself at home for a while before ultimately getting captured by some vets. Dude was chilling. Like, he just kind of strolled in and was like, I own this place now. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Stuff Keeps Happening. Head to skh.news for sources, bonus content, and your own invasive otter. My name is Endeavorance. We'll talk again soon. Take care and be well.